The UN estimates that by 2050 there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
It's estimated that 100 million tons of plastic are generated globally each year.
Local authorities have been forced to close beaches due to mounds of plastic rubbish.
Hello, I'm Tammy Ven Dange, an executive turned social entrepreneur. It's clear that Mother Nature has a plastics problem, but I think it's time to quit talking about the problem. Instead, let's talk about the solutions. This is a business podcast with an environmental mission. And as your host of the Plastics Revolution, I'm going to chat with the innovators, change makers, and fellow entrepreneurs who are leading the way in fighting plastic waste. Along the way, we'll also share tips and practical ideas so that you too can be part of the solution. This is the Plastics Revolution. In this episode of Plastics Revolution, I chat with Ryan Swenson, the head of sustainable development at Officeworks. 5 years ago, Officeworks created its first long-term sustainability strategy with the ultimate goal of sending zero waste to landfill. While overall operational waste has increased during this time, they've slashed the amount they send to landfill by nearly half and are now recycling 82% of their waste. This is providing a great case study for other businesses to follow. I hope you enjoy this episode of Plastics Revolution with Ryan Swenson of Officeworks. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tammy. Great to be here.
I originally contacted Officeworks probably a few months ago. I'd read somewhere that your Melbourne store in Ringwood had done a significant reduction in waste. In fact, they hit like a 95% reduction in waste. And I just thought, that's incredible for really any business to be able to achieve such numbers, but especially one that was a part of a larger organization. I wanted to know specifically, what were those people doing at that store that allowed them to achieve such success? I understand that you're working with them on this initiative.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a great example of what can be achieved through the leadership of the store, but also, as you pointed out, part of a large organisation, making sure the right foundations are there to, I guess, enable them to achieve those type of results. So, from our perspective, I guess back in 2015, we developed our first long-term sustainability strategy out until 2020. And that was really developed by talking to a number of our stakeholders, looking at global best practice, but basically identifying those issues of most importance and then really setting targets out for the 5 years. So our strategy included supporting the aspirations of our team and communities through initiatives like balanced leadership and supporting disadvantaged students, making sure we're supporting products and services in sustainable and responsible ways through ethical supply chains, sustainable paper, and importantly, reducing our environmental impact. So through emissions, helping customers recycle, but ultimately working towards zero waste to landfill. And so having that long-term target obviously set the goal as a business and as our team members to work towards. But, whilst it's important to have a target, it's not necessarily the motivation for everyone. And so, we've really, I guess, had a program of embedding this as a culture across the business through a number of initiatives, really.
I did look at your plan this morning about your operational waste reduction, and it said that in the 2018-19 report, it said that you achieved an 82% operational waste reduction from 82% operational waste reduction from your program, or that amount, I suppose, was recycled from 76% before. Now, how do you identify what's operational waste?
Yeah, well, ultimately, it's everything that we generate across our business. So whether that be through our support offices, at our distribution centres, or at our stores. So we have 167 stores and about 8,000 team members. So it's really everything that comes into our business, which is considered waste.
So that includes packaging for your products as well?
Yeah, yep. It includes packaging, things like the pallets that they get sent to stores on, obviously a lot of cardboard in stores, but also things like faulty furniture that we have return issues. and also when we look at the support office, obviously different waste streams, more food waste, and for example, so all of those streams combined.
So if you had an 82% reduction across all the different offices and warehouses and such like that.
So, Tammy, I should probably correct you. It's 82% recycling.
Oh, okay.
Right? 21% reduction.
Got it. Okay. So 82% of all your waste is recycled.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it then that this particular store achieved a 95%?
We take quite a strategic approach in terms of how we enable our stores to hit those targets. And so if I look at broadly what we're doing, first of all, I guess it is about making sure we've got the right infrastructure, back to basics, we've got the right bins in the right place. It's also making sure we've got the right service schedule. And, this was one that was, looked like a really obvious area we could drive change quite quickly. When I started in the role, I guess traditionally waste services are pretty much you go to tender, you set the schedule and you leave it until the next review comes up. But it was obvious if we were having a much greater focus on reducing what was sent to landfill and ultimately putting recyclable material in the right bin, then we needed to be a lot more agile and responsive around how we adjust our service schedules. So one area that actually drove change quite quickly was moving most stores. We were on a 3-metre bin and a weekly collection. We looked at the data and we changed those stores to a fortnightly pickup. And obviously when someone from support office makes a change to a service like waste, it's generally not received that well in store land. But whilst there was a bit of short-term pain over a couple of weeks, it did provide that trigger that meant team members had to reconsider which bin they put it in to make sure they essentially could have their general waste bin last. So there's some stuff that we can do from a central function to help motivate it or get it moving in the right way. But ultimately, it comes down to having the right behaviours. And this is, as we know, behaviour change is probably the hardest part. And when we talk about waste and recycling, it's very much around, ultimately we just want to have a culture that's really about waste avoidance and resource recovery. And I think what Ringwood have done is a great example of that, is that they saw the target that we set and that was kind of irrelevant to them. They said, well, we can get to 95%. And so led by the store manager, Brendan, he obviously, he had the passion, but I think as an organisation, making it or recognising that it was a priority for the business also gave him the opportunity to leverage that. And so he, was pretty creative when we talk about behaviour change. And one thing he picked up on pretty quickly with a team of 40 was that, it's on every one of those team members to make sure they're putting their waste in the right bin. And I think in the early days, he was getting a bit frustrated that he'd find cardboard in the general waste or he'd find bottles, plastic bottles. And so he basically put in a roster where the team would have to sort the bins, one team member per week, and get the right waste in the right bin. And essentially he said to them, we'll stop the roster when it's all in the right bin. And so as you can imagine, it really changed that discussion and that culture around ownership and accountability. And, that was probably one of the first key steps. But then really recognising, the waste, looking at waste generation, elimination, he then put in initiatives like his own compost bin that was outside in one of the gardens in the car park. And so, through these, I guess, processes of identifying and getting the buy-in across the team, was able to move away from their general waste bin through our waste provider altogether and move to a small 240 litre, which is a household size bin, and just collected via the council. And ultimately, what I love about this is it's not just the environmental benefit, but he's eliminated his waste expenses for that store in doing this. And also the kind of unintended benefit is the compost in the car park is actually now forming a community link. So the apartments have been putting their people from the apartments next door have been coming and putting their coffee grounds in there, and there's a local community garden that comes and collects the compost for their allotment. So it's a really nice example of hitting all the sweet spots and ultimately just embedding that as their own culture within that store.
It's so interesting to hear these extra initiatives that store manager took, because it was great that you guys were already setting some high targets at a corporate level. But I imagine that, like most places, when you're working in a large organization or company, sometimes it's hard for the individual employee to feel like they can make a difference. What in the cultural behavior and initiatives that you guys have put in place have prompted someone like Brendan to be able to say, hey, look, I think we could do this, and I know I have support to do these changes? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people would feel like they're disempowered to make anything significant happen when they're part of such a large organization.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think, a lot of it talks to the commitment from our leadership team. So it really does start from the top. It talks to having that strategic approach through our sustainability strategy and identifying those priorities and setting targets and working to them. It really talks to celebrating the successes. So, we call out the great work that the likes of Brendan and his team are doing because it is over and above the day-to-day of running a store. But also, it comes down to looking at ultimately how we want to operate as a business. And, for example, our store teams are not just measured on their financial performance, but through their balanced scorecard, are looking at things around where they're performing on their recycling targets, how much e-waste they're collecting from customers, and how they're supporting the local communities. So it is taking the lens that, ultimately operating a sustainable and responsible business is better for business, as well as being better for everyone and the planet.
So you were just saying that your employees or the store itself is being measured on a balanced scorecard that includes things like recycling?
Yeah, correct.
So both employees and the store. I mean, that's incredible, because most people, I think, would say the store manager is responsible for that, but the individual employee, scorecard or evaluation would look very.
Yeah, well, I would say it's a shared effort ultimately, and those stores operators teams in order to achieve those targets, and so it is very transparent around where they need to focus on. As I mentioned, one of the challenges is the behaviour change component. So whilst we have the target, how do you really get the buy-in? And one of the opportunities that was obvious to me is actually just having a look in the bin. And I think if you look at the work Craig Rucastle did on Warra Waste, where they tipped the bin upside down for the school and had them sort it, you really quickly got a visual of the opportunity just to put the right waste in the right bin. So we started a program back in 2018, and we had it. First of all, we did it at our support office. We took a few people out and we tipped up our general waste bin, and we saw pretty quickly there was some easy ways we could improve our waste management. One example was there were half full rolls of large toilet paper that were in the general waste, and there was a number of them, and we worked out it was around $8,000 a year just of toilet paper. And when we went back and spoke to the cleaners about it, we found out that they were changing the rolls every day, whether they were full or empty, as opposed to waiting until we used it. So that was an easy fix, and spoke to the need to actually let's get a education session with our cleaners and talk about it. But I also noticed that there were some of my documents in the general waste bin that and I was certain I'd put them in the paper recycling bin. And so then that again spoke to that issue of making sure that the cleaners were putting the right waste in the right bin. We then, it was a great example, and it helped us implement a lot of change at support office, like coffee cup recycling. And so then we looked at, well, what does that look like for our store teams? And so I guess taking a leaf out of the Warren Waste book, we identified 5 stores in New South Wales, and we said to them, look, you're coming for a day just to learn a bit more about recycling. And unbeknownst to them, we took their general waste bins and we had them at the facility, and on the day we said to them, all right, well, actually what you're going to do is sort your general waste bin to see the opportunity of how you could reduce waste in your store. And it could have gone, obviously one of 2 ways. But to the amazement, the passion with the team was just like, oh, wow, I can't wait to see what's in there. And they were actually so engaged about it. And what that did as we spent the day sorting the waste, you could easily see that, oh, here's some plastic that should have been recycled, here's some cardboard that should have been recycled. And so we then kind of workshopped through the cause and effect. How did it end up there, and what changes could you make? And through that, they went back to their store and really took ownership and embedded the change. And so we've since rolled that out to about 25 stores. And one comment when I was over in WA recently, at the end of the day, guys said, we used to go to the pub and have our team days, and now we're sorting through waste bins. But it kind of spoke to just that power of coming together around a common purpose, and also seeing the issue firsthand and the opportunity that they can make a difference from their store.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes those practical exercises are probably the most meaningful for someone who might otherwise think it's a cleaner's job to sort the waste.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So how do you measure waste reduction? I was just throwing the numbers. I got the numbers mixed between the reduction of waste in your company as well as the percentage that's being recycled. Obviously, two different numbers. How do you actually measure waste when you're measuring the various stores?
Yeah, sure. I think, it comes back to making sure you've got the right waste provider in the first instance. And before we really drove this, strategically, we identified with the need to go to market and find that right provider. And a key part of that was making sure that they had good data and good reporting that was available to us in a timely manner. And so, having the one provider that does look at, what the weight that's going into our general waste bins, and also the weight of all the recyclable material through the different services that come back. And so ultimately giving you a picture of that total waste generation and the mix between what you're sending to landfill versus what you're recycling. And, we took the approach to work with one waste provider, and I think it's, probably an important step, because ultimately if we're reducing waste we send to landfill by 20% year on year and putting it more in recyclable streams, then, working with a partner that actually recognises, well, that component of the business is going down, and rightly so, and ultimately going in the other direction in recycling. But, also importantly, I can't understate the importance of having reliable and accurate data. And it was one of the challenges when I started in the role, is there was a lot of queries from our teams around the accuracy of data. And I think, once you've got that as a discussion point, it obviously kind of undermines the purpose of it, which is to be, have reliable measurements in place. And so that's kind of a fundamental part that has enabled us to build it into balanced scorecards and annual reporting targets.
You just talked about selecting a provider, and sustainable procurement is such a hot topic right now. I just attended the National Plastic Summit, and government in particular is trying to put together some measures for sustainable procurement. What is Officeworks doing in that space right now? Yeah,
sure. So for us, I guess our current focus has really been looking at the overarching initiative. So, as a customer, if you shop at Officeworks, what does that mean in terms of sustainable purchasing? And the first one would really be around our commitment to sustainable paper. So we're part of our strategy. We set the goal that by December this year, all of our paper products would either be FSC certified or made from 100% recycled content. And with around 10,000 paper products, as you can imagine, it's been quite a process to shift the dial on that. But that then, I guess, created the foundation for us to launch our Restoring Australia program, which is ultimately a 2-for-1 tree planting program. So for customers that purchase paper products from us, we look at the weight of paper and how does that kind of equate to trees. And then through that, we're restoring landscapes across Australia with our partner, Greening Australia. And so since launching that in 2017, we've planted nearly 600,000 trees. So, again, it's that overarching impact that customers can have by buying paper. We then, a lot of work is being done on making sure that our packaging is recyclable across all of our private label products and engaging local suppliers. And then, from a customer perspective, also supporting them to dispose of their e-waste and pens and batteries in a responsible way by offering recycling collection points in stores. So that's, I guess, addressing some of those overarching initiatives. But clearly, we're seeing that move towards more sustainable products or the circular economy transition, and so that does then give us the opportunity to look at what other sustainable products can we bring to market, whether that be more products designed from 100% recycled content, for example.
So let's go back to, first of all, packaging. Mm-hmm. Do you have any examples of when you've actually worked with a vendor to change their packaging so that it could be properly recycled?
Yeah, I'd say the most recent example is in our furniture range. So we sell a lot of furniture for the home office or more commercial products. And by its nature, a lot of the products have typically been designed with polystyrene to protect the product. So clearly, we know there's issues associated with polystyrene, and again, want to make it easy for our teams and our customers to recycle the packaging when they buy products from us. So, that was very much around eliminating the use of polystyrene whilst ensuring that the packaging is still fit for purpose. So we did some trials with some of our suppliers overseas on how we could remove that. And as with anything, it's, it's a change of how they operate. And basically, it was a matter of our buyer having to, visit each factory and work with them to identify ways that we could remove the polystyrene, redesign the packaging, but do it in a commercial way, that it wasn't just, replacing it like for like and adding cost. And what we've been able to do is balance that, so it hasn't caused any issues from a financial perspective, but we've been able to make the right decisions from an environmental perspective. And so we'll start seeing all of that product flow through from this month. Okay,
so instead of polystyrene, what are you using as a replacement?
Recycled cardboard, basically.
Oh, okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously a lot easier to recycle and compostable as well.
Yeah.
Are you guys able to recycle soft plastic right now?
We a certain grade of soft plastic in our stores, and we put bins around our support office. But in store, really, and this is where you talk about how you can influence the supply chain. Obviously, when China changed its approach through the National Sword Policy, it really put a focus on contamination rates. And so one area we saw is plastic wrapping that came in on pallets, where it was a mix and we would have black and clear. We obviously needed to go to a cleaner stream. And so we worked with our suppliers just to remove black plastic altogether coming to our stores so that we could have that cleaner stream.
Great. Well, certainly the recyclers here will thank you for doing that, because if they get a hold of the plastic, then they're always complaining about it being dark. They're like, why can't it be clear? So that's good to know.
Yeah.
Ryan, we've talked a lot about Officeworks, but I'm really curious to know about how you got into your current role and how did you become so passionate about sustainability?
Yeah, sure. So my, post-uni career, found myself in buying and did that for a few years, but came to the conclusion, I needed something a bit more. So set off for a year with my now current wife, and we backpacked through South America. And as we headed down to the southernmost city, Ushuaia, we cottoned on to the fact that boats from Ushuaia head to Antarctica from there. And if you've got time to wait around, there's often last-minute deals that you can capture, that you can catch. So we kind of debated it and then decided just to put it on our credit card and jumped on a boat after waiting a week. But really through that, on that boat was a climate scientist called Dr. Steve Running. And as we crossed the Drake Passage, which is one of the roughest passages in the world, he gave a series of presentations on climate change. And that really, piqued my interest. And in talking to him and obviously weighing up what I was doing next, he, kind of put me in that direction of considering an MBA in sustainability. And so, that kind of really played a pivotal role for me. And when I went to London, I did that. But after taking a role at Officeworks, I've transitioned into this field.
Well, it's completely appropriate to go from a buyer to someone who's advocating sustainability, given this day and age where the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that commercial background because, it's so much more than just doing the right thing. That's, there's business case in why we would do all of this. And so it's bringing that all together.
Well, your current role, I think you do actually a lot more than just waste and recycling. And you did mention climate change and carbon emissions. I've noticed on your reports as well that you guys have been doing quite a bit of work to try to reduce your energy consumption and your carbon emissions. Do you want to talk anything about any of those programs?
Yeah, sure. So again, it was a key pillar of our plan. How do we reduce our emissions, which at the time was set back in 2015, a target of 20% by 2020. And so a lot of the work we did was around addressing energy efficiency in the first place. So implementing LED lighting, putting in building energy management systems across our network. And that's really seen us achieve that goal. And so now we've looked into the next 5 years and we said we'll reduce it by another 25%. And really that's through the role of renewable energy, particularly solar. So we're starting to roll out solar across our stores. And I think, this is one where you look at the commercial lens and really not just reducing emissions, but mitigating the cost increases that we've seen in the electricity sector. So
good for the environment, good for business too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your current plan is only until 2020, which we're here now. So are there any plans at Officeworks that you're able to share with us now?
Yeah, we're obviously working through what the next 5 years look like for us now. And we'll expect to have that firmed up sometime this year. But I guess, what I would say is that we've shown through our first plan that, back in 2015, setting some pretty bold and ambitious targets at the time, that we've been able to achieve or exceed them. And so that's really probably set the foundation for us as a business to say, okay, where do we next want to play? How bold do we want to be? And whilst we might not have all the answers of how to get there, we know that there's a need from our stakeholders' interest, whether that be customers, team members, more broadly around those areas. So we're working through that at the moment, basically.
What advice would you have for employees in other places that might feel like they don't have the authority to implement such programs?
Yeah, I think it's about how you can kind of put the case together around why you can change and who you ultimately need to influence to help make those decisions. And so that's when, if I come to our waste example with Ringwood, it has reduced the cost of doing business. And that benefit is then around the environmental impact as well. So depending on the driver and the situation, I think it's how you kind of frame your case. It may be, taking a more community lens approach and representing the needs of the community and building those community connections if that's what helps get the initiative across the line. And look, one other example when we talk around, the role of individuals to help influence change, we had an example in our support office where you'd probably be familiar with the soft plastic recycling that Coles and Woolies offer through REDcycle, the collection points. And so this team member identified that there was a need to have those collections around our office. So he set up a couple of collection spots and he would take those bags and put them in his car boot and drive them down to Coles once a week. And it quickly became twice a week and a couple of trips. And so it really just showed to us, well, actually we need to partner with REDcycle and actually implement that as a service. And so something that started just with that individual action showed the need for us to offer something more appropriate.
Have you actually partnered with REDcycle?
Yeah, we have. Just last week, we became a member of them so that we can start to update our messaging on our packaging where we have soft plastic and we can't avoid it to then encourage people to recycle that at an appropriate store collection point.
Oh, fantastic.
And, I'd say one thing that we've seen is that anyone across the business can have a great idea and particularly in our environment where we use Yammer, so the internal social media, how some of those ideas can gain traction is really powerful through those channels. An example I had the other day in our Jandakot store, they've considered the role of repurposing and reusing some of their waste out of the print and copy centre. So they've set up a free collection station of these items, and we found that teachers and early learning centres are coming in and taking these cardboard rolls and other items for their arts and crafts project. And just by one person kind of taking that initiative, sharing it, there's been a lot of momentum from other stores saying, that's great, we'll implement something here. So I think, sometimes just getting something off the ground and showing how it works and then sharing that helps build that momentum behind it as well.
Oh, what a great example, too, of taking something that would otherwise be considered waste and turning it into value for teachers and teaching.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I have, one other story around that, I guess, in a way, unintended benefit with that community link is just this week we had a childcare centre come in with their educators and the kids to spend a bit of time in store to learn about sustainability. And recently we've just rolled out some new bin signage, which features images of the most common queries we get in our waste streams that stores have been able to set up across all their bin systems. And basically what the store did was use that signage and play a bit of a game with the kids around which bin does the waste go in. And so, a really nice example, again, of how we have developed something for our teams, but it's kind of gone beyond, and they've been able to engage their local community to help educate them as well.
I never thought about taking preschoolers to Officeworks for a field trip.
I know. Times change.
Were there any other stories or anything you wanted to share, Ryan?
Yeah, one example I'd give is just our focus on furniture that we're doing at the moment, and this kind of links to the circular economy in that sense as well. We've started partnering with the world's biggest garage sale in Queensland, and we're sending them some of our faulty furniture that comes back from customer returns. And basically what they're doing is using their team to actually start repairing those items. So if they may have 10 faulty chairs and they can make 6 good ones out of it over a 12-week period, avoiding those going to landfill and then ultimately selling them on. And the benefit, I guess, we see through this is also a better understanding of where are the faults. So ultimately, we don't want any faulty furniture ending up there. We want to be addressing it upstream or having a repair or solution that our team members can easily address. So having, again, it kind of comes back to that data, having that data to help address these issues upstream is a really important part of that. So partnering, with others that are not your likely partners is also really important in this space about how we can continue to reduce our environmental impact.
I think that's a fantastic initiative. I imagine that some of that furniture that you had before, with even some small faults, might have just ended up in landfill otherwise. So being able to partner with they're a charity, aren't they? They
are, yeah. And that's it. And this is in Queensland. I think this is where it talks to the changing policy landscape, because there's a landfill levee in Queensland now that is a great deterrent of sending things to landfill. So when we talk about the value in something, well, there is now, we'll come back to a business case as well, not just why this is the right thing to do, but it avoids that cost of sending it to landfill.
And someone is getting some use out of that product that would have otherwise been considered waste.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Once again, good for the environment, good for business.
Yeah.
Great. Ryan, is there any requests that you might have for our listeners?
Yeah, still having some challenges in what we can recycle, particularly with laminating offcuts. And as you'd imagine, with our distribution centres, the back of labels. And so trying to find a solution in the background, but haven't had any luck yet. So if anyone knows how we can recycle that material locally, we'd be all open to hearing it.
Okay. I'm thinking of at least 2 companies that may be able to help you out.
Yeah, great.
Ryan, if people want to know more about the Officeworks programs, where can they get more information?
Yeah, sure. You can head to our website, officeworks.com.au, and there's a section on sustainability. You can read our latest report and some of the initiatives we offer in store.
And there's some great videos there, too, on some of your programs.
Yeah.
Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. I think that, people start to think of the bigger businesses as immune to the waste management issues that the small businesses or the medium-sized businesses might face on a daily basis. But the reality is you probably have far more waste than they do. And so it's a much bigger problem, which is usually harder to solve. You guys have done so much work in the space already. There's a lot of other programs that you hadn't mentioned that I've noticed. And I just wanted to thank you guys for, first of all, being open to having this conversation on the podcast, and also for the work that you're doing and continue to do to try to reduce waste, and specifically for this podcast, plastic waste too.
Yeah, no problem, Tammy, and appreciate the opportunity to share some of what we're working on. Hopefully others learn something from it and it supports them in what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for joining me today on this podcast. If you want to see the links or to review any information we spoke about today, then check out our show notes on this channel or on our website, plasticsrevolution.com. If you found anything interesting or helpful at all, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to our show and to tell others. Stay tuned next week as I chat to another innovator, change maker, or fellow entrepreneur who is leading the plastics revolution. This is Tammy Ven Dange. Be kind to animals and Mother Nature.